Oh, finally, my iPack showed up. Now I can make a video on it. Ah, jinkies! Again? Why does this have to happen every single time? So, yeah, the iPack, huh? This is something that I've been looking into for quite some time before I actually broke down and bought one, mostly because there's at least 1.5 million models of it to choose from, each with its own catchy name, like this one, the iPack H2215. But what is an iPack anyways? Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, smartphones weren't nearly as popular nor capable as they are today, and so the primary option for people who wanted computing power on the go was to purchase a PDA, or Personal Digital Assistant. Now I've already covered the Newton, Apple's PDA, on this channel before, but naturally other companies also created their own PDAs, or in the case of Microsoft, they laid out a standard for an ARM-based device they called Pocket PC, that would run the Windows Mobile operating system. While many companies released devices compatible with this standard, one of the most popular brands at the time was HP, who produced the Giornata. After buying out Compaq though, HP replaced its line of Pocket PCs with compacts, known as the iPack. As viewers of the other video are bound to notice, the iPack hasn't had very many design changes throughout its existence. Nearly all models, from the original monochrome ones in 2000, had 4 buttons and 1 directional pad below a vertical touchscreen, with the exception of some later models that included a QWERTY keyboard in place of the buttons, mimicking the BlackBerry design. For this video though, I'm going to talk about the model I have with me here, the H2215 from 2003. The same year as my TC1100 tablet actually. Oddly enough, like the tablet, it's pretty impressive just how much was crammed into a device this size for the time, starting with the 400MHz PXA250 Intel ARM processor. Along the front, there's the 320x240 3.5-inch color display with a resistive touchscreen, making use of either a stylus stored in the top right corner of the device, or a sufficiently narrow object like a fingernail to tap items on the screen. Other inputs for the device include the 4 pre-programmed buttons at the bottom of the unit, each acting as a shortcut to a user-specified program, and the directional pad between the buttons. I'm actually pretty impressed with this D-pad, which acts more like a thin joystick, especially after seeing many of the other iPack models with the clicky button type. The stick itself doesn't appear to provide any analog input to the device, but regardless, it is still a lot more pleasant to use than most other D-pads. The iPack has 2 status lights on the top, one that lights up orange to indicate the device is charging, and one that lights up blue to indicate the device's Bluetooth radio is active. The iPack doesn't come with Wi-Fi connectivity, a common addition with later models, however it is able to access the internet through Bluetooth tethering or by adding a modem card to the upper compact flash slot on the top of the device. The device also has a much smaller SD slot, which is practically a necessity with its 64MB of internal memory. Actually, to be more precise, the SD slot is an SDIO slot, meaning that just like compact flash, you can add in hardware peripherals to the slot. And trust me, there are quite a few different hardware peripherals for this thing, like a GPS or a camera, that can be popped into the top for added functionality, though they deserve a video of their own. About the only other thing of note in terms of the iPack's hardware is its docking port along the bottom. Though it appears some models just came with a plug that went into the base of the device, mine came with a docking cradle, with a plug to charge the device, and a USB cable that allows the iPack to sync with the PC anytime it's plugged in. The cradle even has a space to charge a spare battery, which could easily be replaced by opening a little door on the back of the iPack. The device runs Windows Mobile 2003 SE, and, as a result, seems to take a lot of cues from the most recent version of Windows at the time, XP. From icons and assets lifted directly from the OS's visual theme, to quirks like having a start menu or a surprisingly non-abstracted file browser, it feels almost like the OS was an attempt to cram the entire Windows operating system into a pocket-sized form factor. Oh wait. A lot of what's pre-installed on the device, in fact, are pared-down versions of XP programs. You get the obligatory solitaire, but there are quite a few more interesting programs also bundled in. Windows Media Player, for example, can not only play music, turning the device into an MP3 player, but it can even pull off playing video, either in windowed mode or in full screen, at a decent frame rate. You won't be fitting any movies in the iPack's internal memory, but with a large enough SD card, it's at least theoretically possible. The iPack also comes with Pocket Internet Explorer, a bare-bones web browser that unfortunately doesn't play too well with today's more modern web standards, resulting in a lot of pages being displayed incorrectly or just not loading at all. Older sites with more basic formatting show up more or less readable though. I'm sure even at the time this program was somewhat of a pain to use, but for a quick and dirty way to access the internet from a portable device, it does its job well enough. In terms of productivity software, the iPack still beats out some smartphones today. You have your standard contacts, mail, and calendar apps, but Windows Mobile also packs Pocket Word and Pocket Excel. The best way I can describe these two is that they have about the same functionality as Docs to go on the BlackBerry Playbook. You can open documents, make edits, do some basic formatting, and that's about it. Given your methods of input, actually writing a document on this thing looks like it would be a pain, but I'm pretty sure the intended uses for these programs were more as lightweight document viewers rather than editors. Your options for text input on the device are a small touch keyboard on the bottom of the screen, Art for typing short things like a name or a web address, two variants for individual letter recognizers, and a mode called Transcriber that allows you to write full words anywhere on the screen. In my experience though, Transcriber is pretty bad, at least for my handwriting. I'm impressed with all the configuration options for it, allowing you to adjust it to only recognize the way you write certain characters, but even after going through every letter to exclude all the mistaken matches it makes for my handwriting, like seeing an S when I write an O, it was still unable to reliably convert my handwriting into much more than constant gibberish. It's kinda surprising considering that Microsoft already had a decent recognizer included with Windows Tablet Edition, but I can only imagine that the Pocket PC running at 400 MHz just didn't have the hardware to run the program quickly enough. Also included is a Notes program which dislikes my handwriting a little bit less, occasionally getting up to Newton levels of accuracy. Alongside plain text, the Notes program stores drawings and even audio recordings of this quality from the iPac's internal microphone. Though that pretty much covers most of the pre-installed software, there are a few additional programs included with the iPac that are interesting, like Nevo, a program that allows you to turn your iPac into a universal remote control, Jawbreaker, a simple little puzzle game with the goal of knocking out adjacent stacks of colored balls, Microsoft Reader, an ebook reader, and Pocket MSN. As for third-party software on the iPac, it's actually fairly difficult to find. For starters, almost all of the software sharing websites are long since dead, but even with the Internet Archive to help me, many of the programs to be found online only support Windows Mobile 5 and 6, the next versions after Mobile 2003. And even after narrowing down that list, lots of programs released at the time were trial versions or behind paywalls. It seems funny nowadays considering most apps range from low prices to free, but a lot of software for Pocket PCs back in the day had similar prices to the PC versions. For example, games by Astroware were typically running for around $15 at launch. Still, even with good freeware programs being somewhat few and far between, I was able to track down a couple decent programs for my iPac. First up is the browser Opera Mini, as an alternative to Internet Explorer. Given the specs of the device it's running on, it's actually kind of uncanny how smoothly this program runs, while offering plenty of additional features and support over Internet Explorer. It has tabbed browsing, loads nearly every website that Internet Explorer failed to load, and even does fairly well in the first two acid tests, although the third one fails to start. Adobe Reader was also ported to the iPac, meaning that you can read PDFs on this thing. The Reader program unfortunately is pretty slow, but I'm sure it was pretty handy regardless. For the reasons stated previously, games were probably the hardest software for me to find, but I did manage to find the trial version to Bejeweled 2 for the Pocket PC. There's not much to say past that it's a solid game, with great graphics, that goes wonderfully with a stylus. The included Photos program is decent as a photo viewer for the device, but in terms of editing, all it can offer are crops and rotations. Thankfully there's Pocket Brush, an image editor that even puts MS Paint to shame in a few areas. Pocket Brush works fundamentally the same as Paint for the most part. It has similar brushes, drawing tools, and so on, but it goes above and beyond with things like its gradient and blur tools. Plus, drawing is just easier in general with a stylus. Even though finding it can be difficult, installing software for the iPac is actually pretty easy, either by running an executable that loads the program onto your device through the ActiveSync program, or by copying a cab file onto the device and launching it from there. The iPac, and Pocket PCs in general, are honestly a really interesting symbol of their time in the early 2000s, where PDAs were becoming more and more powerful computing platforms, as well as communication devices with their growing support for the internet, yet they hadn't been completely knocked out by smartphones. This isn't the last video I'm doing on the iPac, and I'm planning to make the next one on hardware peripherals I mentioned earlier. Some of these things are pretty unique, and it'll be fun to test them out on video. Anyways, I figure that's enough for an introductory video on the iPac. Stay tuned for the next installment in what I'm now dubbing Pocket PC Month for my channel.